Okay. Dave. Okay. Okay, you gentlemen want to sit down over here first, okay? Well, I'm gonna do the introduction, I'll introduce you, and then when Keisha does the program, then you can go sit in the audience, then you can have come back and answer questions and answers, okay? Leila.
Malia. Okay. From Senator Toohil. Oh. I say Senator Toohil. You're on. No sidebars.
Although you weren't sitting here.
Oh, boy. Well, I don't know about that.
Well, no, we would be gorgeous.
That's what I said, no sidebars.
She's from Butler. She would still be.
What's your? Yeah, we've got just a minute. All the same. That's my limit. That's my limit. All right. I'm looking around and I got about that I know of 4 constituents. And 4 we have. And one of them is Charlie, and one of them is Gene Haverly. Gene works.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending. I am Charles Urban, President of the Luzerne County Taxpayers, and we have Gene Haverly, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel, President of Mountaintop on the Move. Gene, would you make a stand up here? And we have Frank Sorek, a realtor, and for helping sponsor this event. And Frank is also running as a candidate for Mayor of Wilkes-Barre. We want to give a big thanks to King's College and Wilkes Radio Sue Henry. She did a fantastic job of spreading the word on her radio broadcast. Before we begin, I would like you to know that this event is being live webcast that is being shown throughout Pennsylvania. We would like to thank 1824 Production for their kind generosity for doing this free. Let's give them an applause and a thank you. Thank you, folks. Tonight, before we begin, you will get the details of this vital legislation and learn what we can do to make school property elimination a reality, and hear which of your lawmakers support House Bill, Senate Bill 76. I would like to introduce Representative Jerry Mullery. Jerry, okay. Aaron Kaufer. Representing John Yudichak is Mark Davis. John could not make it here tonight. And Taryn Toohil, she's down in Harrisburg, but she sent Malia from her office. Okay. Lisa Baker cannot attend. She is celebrating her 30th wedding anniversary. I called her up and I told her, well, Lisa, I said, I'm going to be celebrating my 60th in October. Karen Boback has a special engagement, and Sid Michaels and Mike Carroll cannot attend. But these senators are sponsors and supporters of House Bill 76. I invited Senator Blake and I invited Representative Pajinski, but I have not received any word. Our guest speaker is a very good and close friend of mine, and we the people, who is taking a lead role for us to eliminate the school property taxes in Pennsylvania. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Dave Baldinger. Dave, would you come up here? Dave has traveled throughout the Commonwealth, speaking on House Bill 76, elimination of school property tax. Mr. Baldinger is a full-time volunteer taxpayer advocate and political activist from Burke County, whose exclusive focus is the elimination of school property tax and education finance reform. He became involved in this effort in 2004, and since then he has become one of Pennsylvania's leading experts on property tax elimination issues. David administers the Pennsylvania Taxpayer Cyber Coalition, which is PTC, a web-based taxpayer, and is a founder and organizer of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayers Association, a statewide alliance of 84 grassroots and adversary groups that are working as one for the elimination of school property taxes through House Bill 76 and Senate the Property Independence Act. We will now turn this meeting over to Mr. Baldinger, and after he is done, we will have a question and answer period. And you could ask him any questions you have. You could ask him after his presentation. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you very much, Charlie, and thank you for all your hard work getting this meeting set up. It's really appreciated. Thank you, folks who came out tonight, and I also want to thank all those who were tuned into the webcast. This is unique for us. We have never had a statewide audience before. In the past 3 years, I've probably given 100 of these presentations, but always to groups like you, and now suddenly we have the opportunity to spread the message statewide, and I'm very pleased about that. Could I have the first slide, please?
You want to watch? Turn around.
I have it up.
You can turn your chairs around.
There we go. Thank you. As Charlie said, my name is David Baldinger. I'm from Berks County, and property taxes have been my full-time unpaid job for the past 10 years, since I retired in September of 2004. This is a critical issue and something we need to get solved in Pennsylvania. I'm going to start you off tonight with a few numbers because I don't believe you can understand the solution we're talking about if you don't understand the problem. So let's talk about the problem first, then I'll tell you about the bill. Here's a few numbers for you. $27 billion is the current total cost of K-12 education in Pennsylvania. The average annual historical rate of increase is 6.25%. If you use that as a constant and extend it out 10 years, you'll find the cost of education in Pennsylvania will balloon to $53 billion. Totally unsustainable and has to be brought under control. That's another number for you. Who's aware of the pension crisis? You bet. This is the estimate of how much your property taxes could go up in the next 2 to 3 years just to meet the requirements of the pensions. Now, I don't know about you folks, but for me, a 30% increase in my property taxes is going to be really difficult to deal with, and I think it may be for you too. And finally, I have one more number for you. Anybody have a guess at that? Let me show you. This is from the Reading Eagle. I also have one here from Luzerne County, from Cumberland County, from Lackawanna County, all the same thing, but notice it says at the top, tax sale. These are not foreclosures. These are properties being sold for non-payment of property taxes. 10,000 is the number we estimate. 10,000 families lose their homes every year in Pennsylvania for non-payment of property taxes. And interestingly, there's a group from Harrisburg, the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, and one of their spokespersons said during a hearing on Senate Bill 76 a couple of years ago that 10,000, considering all the homes in Pennsylvania, is statistically insignificant. I'm sorry, that's a pretty rough way to put it. One home lost in Pennsylvania to property taxes is significant, and I don't want to hear that 10,000 is insignificant. So rather than talk about property taxes, let's talk about education finance, which is really where the problem lies. First myth, property taxes are the problem. They are not. Property taxes are nothing more than a symptom of a much greater problem. Here's the real problems. Property taxes go back to the Middle Ages, the times when you had the serfs and the landowners, and the only ones who could afford to pay for their government were the landowners, and they were taxed on the amount of property they had. We introduced this system in Pennsylvania early in the 17th century, rather 18th century, sorry, because at that time there was no form of income reporting, so there's no way to determine a person's income for taxation purposes, but we were an agrarian society. Most people earned their living from the land. So you could assume that a farmer who was farming 40 acres was earning more than a farmer who was farming 10 acres. And he was taxed accordingly, and at that time it probably made sense. Now, what sense does it make? We live in our homes. They don't generate income for us. Why are we being taxed as if our homes are income producers for us? The system is just outdated and makes no sense, but worse, it violates the most basic precept of good taxation, and that the tax should reflect a person's ability to pay the tax. The property tax in no way does that because it's based on the assumed value of your home. Doesn't matter if you run into financial hard times, doesn't matter if you're retired. Your income is affected, property taxes are not. Property taxes are inherently arbitrary and unfair. If any of you have gone through a reassessment, and I know you did here in Luzerne County, what, about 4 or 5 years ago? With not very good results, if I remember correctly, too. Our last reassessment in Berks County was in the early 90s. Now, my wife and I live in a cookie-cutter development. Most of the homes were built about the same time, they're the same square footage, same lot size, very similar homes, yet somehow our home was assessed at $25,000 more than the one next to us. We appealed it, got a few $1,000s knocked off, but that's not the point. It just shows how arbitrary the system is, that an assessor can walk out and say, your house is worth $200,000, yours is worth $150,000. How? Just because they say so? The only true value of a home is what agreed to between a willing buyer and a willing seller. That is the only true value of a home, not an assessor walking out and pointing to a house and say, this is how much it's worth. Inability to pay property tax bills. Every year, twice a year, when we pay our property taxes, I always go on the last day of the rebate period and I have a chat with our tax collector, who agrees with what we're trying to do. I just saw her several days ago to pay the county and municipal taxes, and I asked her how things were going this year. She said people are struggling with the county and municipal tax, and that's the easier of the two bills. She said last fall for the school property taxes, more folks than ever were complaining about taking out home equity loans or second mortgages on their house or loans to pay the property tax bill. She said they're having trouble now meeting the county and municipal bill. I have absolutely no idea how they're going to pay the school property tax bill when it comes due in August. We've heard this from all over the state, that people are really struggling to pay the property taxes, and it's not getting any better. Out of control spending. I don't like to bash school boards. I think in a lot of cases it's a thankless job. And there are a lot of good, dedicated people who are doing the best job they can, but there are those who have agendas as well. We have seen it in school districts throughout the state. Closest to home for you folks, Monroe County, East Stroudsburg North School District. A couple of months ago, they announced they were going to build an artificial surface running track with an artificial surface infield and new bleachers at a cost of $1.7 million. This school district is struggling. Their taxpayers are struggling. The taxpayers complained to the school board, and the school board basically ignored them. And when one of the school directors was asked why they were going ahead with this project at $1.7 million, they said, well, East Stroudsburg South has one, so we should have one too. Now, is that a good reason to spend $1.7 million of the taxpayers' dollars? In our own school district in Berks County, $1.5 million for an artificial turf football field, and they said, what the heck, as long as we're doing it, let's pop another $1 million to take care of the to artificial turf, the auxiliary lacrosse field. Then we built a $500,000 weight training room and a $250,000 tennis complex, in their words, 2 blocks from the municipal tennis courts. This is taxpayer money, and I'm sorry, I don't see how this has anything to do with educating our children. The money could go far better in the classroom than it can building Taj Mahal schools. And what it comes down to is you have school board members with agendas, and the worst, the absolute worst, are the helicopter parents. These are the school board members who are elected because they have children in school, and they want only the best for their children. We had one school director who insisted that the school start ballet classes because her daughter wanted to learn ballet. And you find this as well all over the state. Those school board members who have agendas and only want the best and really don't consider how it affects the taxpayers. Lack of effective education cost controls. Supposedly Act 1 of 2006 was supposed to take care of that by forcing school districts to go to referendum for any tax increases greater than an index of inflation that is issued every year by the Department of Education. This year it was 1.7%. Except they allow 3 exceptions to referendum: grandfathered debt, special education, and Aaron, what's the third? I'm losing my third one there. What is it? Say again? Somebody say it.
Contract resolution?
No, what is that? Grandfathered debt. Pensions, of course, pensions.
I had it. I was right.
That's it. If they can prove that they need the money for one of those 3 things, they can raise taxes above the index without a referendum. Roughly 40% of Pennsylvania school districts, on average, apply for exceptions to the referendum each year, and it's granted. 1.7 this year, our school district has announced at 3.6. The biggest we've seen is close to 9% this year, again with exceptions to referendum. There is no effective cost control on the increase in property taxes. And finally, the projected cost of education that I talked about. So I know it's going to be difficult for some of you in the back to see this, but this pretty much illustrates the problem. Back in 2013, the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office, which is the same as the Congressional Budget Office and does fiscal studies, did a study of Senate Bill and House Bill 76, the bill we're going to talk about tonight. This chart is taken directly from the IFO report. It covers a 20-year time span from 1993 to 2013. The top line is the increase in property taxes. The center line is the increase in the state average weekly wage, which is a direct reflection of a person's ability to pay the tax. The bottom line is the increase in the consumer price index, or the increase in inflation. Since 1993, property taxes have gone up 146%, compared to 80%, almost half, the average weekly wage, and if I can see it, 59% for the consumer price index. And that line keeps accelerating. The gap keeps widening between the property tax increase and persons' ability to pay that tax. Not only is it driving homeowners out of their homes, but if this continues at this rate, eventually the education finance system in Pennsylvania is going to fail. We've got to find a way to flatten that black line, and I'll talk about it in a bit, flatten that black line and bring the cost of education closer to what people are able to afford. What are the real problems? An irreparably broken K-12 public education finance system. Myth number 2, property tax relief or property tax reform is the solution. How many times have you heard those words? Over the past 30 years. And tell me, how's the Act 1 gambling revenue working out for you? Act 50, Act 72, and Act 1, and House Bill 1600 a few years ago were all variations on a theme. They all called for a local tax shift from property taxes to an earned income tax. In the case of Act 50 and Act 72, it was at the school board's discretion. Very few school boards in the state opted to do it. So, in 2006 with Act 1, when they wrote that bill, at Governor Rendell's insistence, they said there would be a referendum in every school district on whether or not to shift to an earned income tax. 498 school districts were eligible, 494 rejected it. Following the referendum, Governor Rendell said that the people were stupid for rejecting it. I'm sorry, they weren't stupid, they understand, because this is the problem with all 4 of those things. You can shift taxes from property taxes to another source like an earned income tax, but as long as you don't cap the property tax, eventually it's going to rise to its previous level with new taxes to pay on top of it. And they understood that with the Act 1 tax shift, and so did the school boards with Act 50 and Act 72. HB 1600 was just another variation on it, only on the state level. Half a point increase in the sales tax, quarter-point increase in the income tax, for about a $400 tax rebate. How long is it going to take for your property taxes to go back up? $400, and now you're paying 2 new taxes plus the original property tax bill. Last session in the House, House Bill 1189, the Optional Property Tax Elimination Act. Got the O, the optional, same thing, local tax shift. Nobody wanted to hear about it. The bill eventually failed. And the Act 1 rebates from gambling money. Let's talk about Governor Wolf's plan. I'm sure you've heard of it by now, and the governor is promising, on average, a 50% property tax reduction for homeowners across the state. His revenue generator is basically the earned income, a personal income tax. It generates about $3.2 billion a year. Total school property taxes, residential property taxes statewide, are about $10 billion. Now, unless you're using some sort of new math, $3.2 billion doesn't sound like half a 10 to me. What's worse is that although the governor says there are effective cost controls in the bill, they really aren't, and will allow school districts to, again, keep raising property taxes until they're right back where they were before, only in this case you're paying an increase in the sales tax from 6 to 6.6%, and an increase in the income tax from 3.07 to 3.7%. Going to pay higher taxes, maybe temporary relief, and the thing that really gets to me about it is the distribution model. It is so inequitable and unfair. Pennsylvania Department of Education published a spreadsheet shortly after the governor's plan became news. It showed the proposed reduction for every school district in the state. On the extreme ends, the Mars School District in Butler County is given about a 15% property tax reduction. The West Green School District in Greene County, 306% reduction. There are those who are getting just a pittance and those who are making out like bandits, and it is nothing but a redistribution of wealth statewide. We strongly oppose the WILK plan, and for another reason as well. The basis of the WILK plan, let me back up, a little bit of history. Representative Jim Cox from Berks County allowed our taxpayers groups to work with him starting in November 2010 to craft House Bill 76 and Senate Bill 76. This is as much a taxpayer initiative as it is one out of the legislature in Harrisburg, and is unique. You never see this happening in Pennsylvania lawmaking, that the citizens actually have input into legislation. Department of Revenue verified that the basis for the WILK bill is our legislation, House Bill and Senate Bill 76, only he sliced and diced it for his own purposes. And that's what's most infuriating of all about this. We spent 18 months crafting that bill. We've been working on the effort for 10 years. He walked in and stole our legislation. What I said before, the relief is quickly outstripped by relentlessly rising school property taxes, and any property tax relief plan is doomed to failure if the system isn't restructured, and that's the bottom line. There's our 3 R's. No relief, no reform, no reduction. We've heard those words for 30 years. Replace the school property tax, drive a stake through it, and end it forever. That poor guy's been sitting there for 30 years. No wonder he looks like that. And the lawmakers have told us time and again, this is a difficult problem. It's very difficult to solve. You've had 30 years to solve it. What are we paying you for? Stop giving us excuses. Get in there and get it done. So why is this the time for change? Rising homeowner discontent. We've heard it from all over the state, and there are those lawmakers who like to tell us that no, this is a regional problem. It doesn't affect the entire state. Nonsense. We've heard it from the west to the east, the northeast. You guys up here tonight. We know that this is a statewide problem. People are upset because of the Act 50, Act 72, and Act 1 failures, especially the relief from gambling revenues. I see it so many times on our Facebook page. Whatever happened to the slots money? Pressure from taxpayers groups in the media. We have a number of media outlets who are totally on board with what we're trying to do and help us when they can. Pressure from the taxpayers groups themselves, 84 groups, plus our Facebook page that has about 4,100, a little more than 4,100 members. They are so reactive, you mention anything on that page and they're on the phone like this. And the lawmakers hear from us, they know we're out here. And I hear from them quite frequently. And I told a story earlier tonight, I won't tell who the lawmaker is, but he sent out a co-sponsorship memo early this session about a bill he wanted to do, local tax shift again. And within a half an hour of the co-sponsorship memo coming out, it was published on the Facebook page, and 45 minutes later, I got a call from his chief of staff saying to me, "What the hell are you doing?" And we'd spent nothing but phone calls for the past 45 minutes. It was posted on Facebook. So we know they're listening to us. And the worst problem of all is a diminishing opportunity to fund property tax replacement from a state-level source. Going back to 2004, Sam Rohr's original property tax replacement plan, we were looking at replacing about $8 billion in school property taxes. Today, just a little more than 10 years later, that number has gone from $8 billion to $12.7 billion. Rohr's plan could have done it with just an increase in the sales tax, not an increase, a broadening of the sales tax base and a reduction in the rate to 4.25%. That would have covered all of it. Now, in 76, we have to use a blended plan, partly sales tax, partly income tax, and we can't drive them much higher than what you're going to hear about tonight because neither the legislature nor the voters will accept it. We have reached the tipping point on this. These numbers are the ones we have to use and have to get it done. This goes on another 2 or 3 years. It's not going to happen. I'm going to refer back to these later, but keep in mind just the basic concept here. July 2014, Arizona State University job growth ranking for Pennsylvania. We are 36th of 50 states in job growth, with a rate of 1.19%. The 2014 United Van Lines National Movers Study that was released in December, Pennsylvania is ranked 9th of 50 in out-migration. 43.2% of the moves were inbound, 56.8% were outbound. And most of the outbound were to escape the property tax and taxation problem in Pennsylvania. We are 10th overall nationwide in tax burden. Most of it is due to the property tax. And those who are leaving are the young people. The ones who see no future here, the ones who can't buy a home and want to go someplace else where the tax load is not as heavy. And one more. Tax Foundation Location Matters, a comparative analysis of state tax costs on business, a report for Pennsylvania. We are 49th of 50 for new firms and 50 of 50 for mature established firms. Think about that for a second. The state tax cost for business is 50%. Why would any business want to come here? Have any of you ever heard of a KOZ? Keystone Opportunity Zone. Targeted tax abatements to attract business to Pennsylvania. The one I'm most familiar with is Cabela's in Hamburg. They received a 10-year abatement. The entire area around Cabela's received it. It was the sweetener that brought Cabela's to Pennsylvania with one of their superstores, and the growth around it has been explosive. They came here because of a 10-year tax abatement. You also know about the Lurdas, the local stuff. We know it attracts business to Pennsylvania. And jobs. So if that's the case, why not get rid of the property tax, throw our arms open and say, welcome to Pennsylvania. Set up shop here, and the jobs you're going to create. The bottom line on this is runaway property taxes are destroying our economy, devastating job-producing small businesses, and driving away its residents. Small business people are absolutely crazy because they say they don't want to hire, they don't want to expand because of the uncertainty of the property tax. Why hire someone when 2 years down the road you're going to have to get rid of them anyway because you can't afford them anymore? There's the solution. Replace the school property tax with a more broad-based and equitable funding stream. House Bill 76, Senate Bill 76, our legislation. Let's look at the details. When Jim Cox and I first started meeting in November 2010, we talked about previous elimination bills. Said, what do we want to do vis-a-vis them? We decided nothing. The revenue sources were the only thing that would remain. We started from scratch. And we looked at what the goals were for the legislation. First of all, total elimination of the school property tax, to be phased in over a 2-year period. Total elimination of school board taxing abilities with a specific exception. I'll get to that. You'll like it. Stabilization of school funding. I want to expand on that a bit. There are those who like to say that we have to have the property tax because it's the most stable form of taxation. And I guess there's a certain truth to that, because when someone's holding a gun to your head, you're going to do what you have to do. And in this case, if you're going to have your home taken, you're going to do whatever you must to hang on to that home, whether it means skipping medicines, food, whatever you have to do, you want to hang on to the shelter over your head. The Upper Merion School District has a large GlaxoSmithKline manufacturing facility, pharmaceutical facility. Several years ago, I think it was 2010, I believe, they filed for a reduction in their assessment. Of course, it was fought by Upper Merion, and it took 2 years to get through the courts, and in the end, GlaxoSmithKline got the reduction, and it meant a $2 million per year reduction of revenue for the Upper Merion School District. The upshot to it was that because it was in the courts for 2 years, Upper Merion had to rebate $4 million to GlaxoSmithKline. I use that as one example, but this is happening statewide. Businesses were the first to adopt it. Homeowners are doing it too, getting a property tax reassessment to lower their property taxes. That means property tax isn't as stable as some people would like you to believe. And when this happens, who makes up for it? Everybody else, because they just jack up the rate to make up the lost revenue. Property taxes are not necessarily a stable form of revenue. And especially with the 2008 housing downturn, your home is worth a lot less now than it was in 2008. Get a reassessment if you think you should. Help lower your property taxes. We also said, establish realistic limits on increases in K-12 education spending. The elimination tax swap must be revenue neutral, and it is. Unlike the WILK plan, which generates about $4 billion more than is going to be driven out to the schools, this is dollar-for-dollar replacement. The revenue generated by the revenue sources in HB and SB 76 gets driven out fully to the schools to eliminate the school property tax. It's the only fair way to do it. The way it works, we take an expansion of the sales tax base. Pennsylvania has the narrowest sales tax base of any state in the country. We know it's going to happen eventually. Governor Wolf is proposing it. Governor Rendell back in 2008 suggested doing the same thing, only for general fund revenues. We know it's going to happen eventually. Why not do it now and use it for a good purpose to get rid of the school property tax? Increase the sales tax rate from the current 6 to 7%, another penny on the dollar, and an increase in the state personal income tax rate from the current 3.07 to 4.34%, or about a penny and a quarter on the dollar. The Act 1 gambling revenue currently allocated to property tax relief, it varies year to year, but it's about $750 to $800 million annually. Compared to $12.7 billion, that's not a lot, but hey, we don't need it anymore, throw it into the pot. And a small retained property tax for long-term debt. And this has been misrepresented so many times, and in fact, one of your representatives here in Luzerne County purposely misrepresents it. When we were looking at the finances for '76, $12.7 billion was a big nut. Had we tried to finance it through the two taxes I mentioned, income and sales tax, we would have either had to take the sales tax to 8, maybe possibly 9%, or increase the income tax above 5%. We said that's never going to fly, either with the legislature or the voters. North Dakota, interestingly, offered a solution to the problem. They tried this several years ago, and what they said was, school districts will be required to pay their long-term debt. It will not be paid from the state level. So at enactment, the school boards will be required to report to the state how much long-term debt they're holding and their annual amount of debt service. They will be allowed to continue to levy enough property tax to meet their debt service and nothing more. They cannot add anything to it. They cannot refinance to stretch it out. Whatever they're paying on it on the date of enactment is what they will pay. Statewide, the average is about 10% of school budgets going to long-term debt payments. Meaning, at enactment, you'll see a 90% reduction in your school property taxes until that debt is paid off. Not going to sugarcoat it. It may be 5 years, it may be 20 years. But I'll take a 90% reduction until that's paid off. And when it is paid off, your property tax goes away completely. This solved two problems. Didn't have to find $2.3 billion more at the state level. But even more, previous versions of the bill absorbed all debt at the state level, which drove up the income or sales taxes. And people who lived in frugal districts complained about it. They said, why should we pay higher state level taxes to finance school districts' debt that weren't as careful with their money? And I think that's a good argument. I don't want to pay for a spendthrift school district with my state tax dollars. So each school district will be responsible for its own debt service. Highest we found was one district with 18% and a handful of districts with no long-term debt at all. And at the end of year 2, their property taxes go away completely. All property tax replacement revenue is to be placed in the Education Stabilization Fund. It's a segregated lockbox account. Now, I usually get some chuckles about that because that's supposedly what Social Security was too. And we've seen how the federal government has rated that. The idea here is not so much to keep the General Assembly from rating it, although it's a different situation in Pennsylvania because we can't borrow to finance this sort of thing. But really, it's more for transparency. Every dollar that's collected is put into that fund. Every dollar that is driven out to the schools, you can see from that fund. You know exactly what's coming in and what's being distributed to the schools, and that's the real purpose of the Education Stabilization Fund. Now, you got to look at the other side of the coin. How are the schools funded? Biggest complaint we hear is from those who don't understand the bill, well, you're going to take all the money from the mid-state counties and you're going to drive it into Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. No. The bill states very specifically, every school district, dollar-for-dollar replacement of all school property taxes eliminated. There is no funding formula. There is no revenue driven out to any other schools. Whatever the school district loses in property taxes, it gets back. There is no redistribution of wealth. The annual funding increases to the schools is based on one of two metrics. Either the increase in the state average weekly wage, which actually runs a little bit above inflation, or the average of the increases in both the sales tax and income tax, whichever is less. But what it effectively does is lock the annual increases to the schools to the level of inflation. Just like all of us who have to work within a budget, they're going to be forced to work within a budget as well, which is the way it should have been all along. Now, I mentioned the school district still retains the possibility of taxation. Supplemental school funding through a local earned income tax or personal income tax. It's subject to a no exception referendum. The school boards cannot initiate this on their own without your permission. For specific projects that they want to build a new school, they want to build a new auditorium, fine. They have to state the purpose of the project, the cost of the project, the tax rate to be applied, and a sunset date for the tax. It can't go on forever. They can also do this, if they wish, for general fund purposes. But if that's the case, it has to be refreshed by referendum every 4 years. One of the strongest arguments we've heard about the bill is that it takes away local control. The only local control taken away by 76, first of all, there's no mandates in it. The school districts are allowed to spend the replacement revenue in any way they wish, but the taxation model requires a voter referendum. The only local control lost is the ability of any 5 school board members with an agenda to raise your property taxes at will. But since the local earned income tax or personal income tax is subject to a voter referendum, my argument is, isn't that the essence of local control? The taxpayers actually have a voice in taxation and spending, which you don't have right now? That's local control. Legislation to be implemented for the replacement of local school district property taxes only and not to be integrated in any way with the current basic education subsidy. That funding will continue in whatever form is determined by the General Assembly. You know, there's three basic funding sources for the schools: federal money, state money, and the local money. The state money isn't really driven out too equitably, and in fact, they're looking at trying to change the funding formula now, which has been around since 1991 and just doesn't work. But we also know that the legislative and executive branches like to mess around a little bit with the funding sometimes, and certain school districts get a little bit more revenue sometimes. We said, look, we're looking at replacing the property tax. We're not looking at trying to change the system. Let's just get rid of the property taxes, let the legislature play in that sandbox and do whatever they want to do as long as we can get rid of the property tax. Introduction of separate concurrent legislation proposing a constitutional amendment to forever abolish property taxes as a school funding source. Anything enacted by statute, anything enacted by statute, like House Bill and Senate Bill 76, can be unenacted in the same way. Constitutional amendment is the guarantee that school property taxes can't come back again. Once it's in the Constitution, and it's a difficult process, has to go through 2 sessions of the General Assembly, plus a voter referendum, but once it's done, it's done. Legislation is in full fiscal compliance with the financial analysis conducted by the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office that was released on October 1st, 2013. We have heard time and time again from opposing lawmakers who have said the numbers don't work. And in fact, last session, the House leadership would not allow 76 to come to the floor for a vote, and in desperation, Representative Cox attached it as an amendment to another bill. This IFO report, a preliminary copy of it, came out to the chairs of the Finance Committee before it was distributed to all the members. Chairs at that time were Representative Phyllis Mundy, who no longer represents you, and Representative Carrie Benninghoff. They had advanced copies because they were chairs. They distorted the facts of the report. They gave numbers that were inaccurate, and the bill was voted down. None of the members of the House had the chance to see the numbers prior to that debate, which was totally unfair. So let's look at this. First of all, the Independent Fiscal Office, besides the numbers, and I'll get to them in a minute, had a bunch of comments at the end. The elimination of school property taxes increases the disposable income of property taxpayers. No kidding. Our school property tax bill is in the order of $4,600 a year. I'll gladly pay the increased sales and income taxes to save that much. It's certainly going to increase my income. It assumes that 70% of the property tax cut goes to individuals, which is about right. 70% for individuals, 30% for businesses. It further assumes that homeowners spend 90% of the increase in disposable income. You're going to get that money in your pocket. What are you going to do? Might buy a new TV, might put a down payment on a new car, maybe even fix up your house. Not only can you afford to do it, but you don't have to worry about the tax assessor coming out and reassessing your house because you fixed it up. The analysis indicates legislation will cause home values to increase on average by more than 10% statewide. This goes back to the 2008 housing downturn. And again, your neighbors in Monroe County know this. They are the poster child for property tax problems in Pennsylvania. More than 3,000 homes in Monroe County are sitting vacant, walkaways. People who couldn't afford to keep them anymore. They're not generating any tax revenue. And typical home on the market in Monroe County for $200,000, which is about the statewide average, not unusual for them to have a property tax bill that is 5% the value of the house. A $10,000 tax bill every year on a $200,000 house. Who is going to buy that house? They can't give homes away in Monroe County. And it has driven down the cost of homes or the value of homes just because of the property tax load. How many more people would be able to afford a home by getting rid of the school property tax escrow every month? Frank, you're a realtor. I'm pointing at the wrong person. Where's Frank sitting? Frank, you're a realtor. Tell us about it. What happens?
People, they will not buy in some of these areas. They absolutely will not.
And mostly because of the taxes.
Absolutely. It's the first question. You know, when someone tells me I need to purchase a home and I would like my home to have, you know, 2-car garage, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and they say I can afford this much, I immediately say to them, okay, these are the areas that you can afford to buy in. And they say to me, are you kidding? The property taxes in the city are outrageous. I'm not going to move there. Or the property taxes here, wherever, you know.
Well, that happened with our son and his wife. They found a home they liked. They could afford the mortgage and found out the monthly property tax escrow was going to be an additional $500. That we can't do it. They eventually bought a home, but it delayed them, and it delays a lot of young people who want to get out of rent and buy a home. They can't afford the property tax escrow. The real estate market in Pennsylvania would explode if you get rid of the school property tax escrow. And we still haven't come out of the 2008 recession. You see it, I mean, the numbers are up and down, but they don't move very much. In every recession this country has ever experienced, it was always the housing market that led the way out of the recession. And we could do that in Pennsylvania simply by getting rid of this onerous tax. The analysis indicates that the legislation, oh, I already got to that, next one. Working age homeowners realize a tax cut. The analysis finds that the increase in federal income tax, because if you itemize on Schedule A, you can deduct the school property taxes. They say even through the lower itemized deductions, state income tax and sales tax, it's still more than offset by the reduction in the property taxes. They said retired homeowners realize a significant reduction in taxes. The analysis finds that the property tax reduction easily offsets any increase from the higher sales tax. I like this one a lot. The elimination of property taxes would significantly reduce the property tax share and would clearly increase the attractiveness of the Commonwealth for business, location, and expansion. So what I said to you earlier about attracting business to Pennsylvania, the IFO confirmed it. More businesses and the jobs they create will move to Pennsylvania simply by getting rid of this tax. Benefits would also accrue to home builders, home developers, and other landowners who convert current land holdings into new housing plots. Employment would increase in the construction sector as well. And regarding business entities, the income flows through to individuals as higher disposable income. For pass-through entities, the analysis assumes that owners and shareholders spend 90% of the increase, and 70% of that is spent on taxable goods and services, yielding another secondary effect of $34 million in increased sales taxes for fiscal year 2013-14. This snowballs. It builds on itself. You have the money back in your pocket. The businesses have the money back in their pocket. They go out and spend it generating more sales tax revenue, which helps to fund education. It's a no-brainer. Yet we have those members of the legislature who absolutely refuse to consider it. And by the way, this answers the question about businesses. I've heard so many people say we shouldn't eliminate for businesses. I have a couple of comments about that. First of all, the IFO report says it's good policy. Second, there's a good reason for it. The uniformity clause of the Pennsylvania Constitution states that all entities in a taxing body must be taxed at the same rate. That means you can't eliminate for homeowners and leave the tax on business without modifying the Constitution. That's a 2 to 3 year process if it happens. A bill to do that has been introduced in the last 3 sessions of the General Assembly and has gone nowhere. We can't afford to wait on that. But the last comment I always make about this is about 80% of the businesses in Pennsylvania are small businesses. These folks are struggling already. They can use the help that property tax elimination provides. And I lost the thought. I'll get back to it. It's a sales tax. The property tax is a pass-through. How could I forget this? Businesses have expenses, labor, electricity, utilities, rent, whatever. Property tax is just another expense. It's added into that expense, they total it up, add their margin to it, and that's the price they sell the product to you for. Businesses don't pay taxes, people pay taxes. Those taxes are passed right along to you in the bottom line of the product. So to say we shouldn't eliminate for businesses, why? I think there's 3 good reasons right there. People's bill, I already told you about it, I don't have to go on that any further. It's our bill, and that's why we are so passionate about getting this bill passed, because we finally have a voice in Pennsylvania lawmaking. Co-sponsorship last year, we don't know the numbers yet this year because the bills have not been formally introduced, and we won't know the totals until they are. Last year in the House of Representatives, we had 86 co-sponsors, 58 Republicans, 28 Democrats. In the Senate, we had 25 co-sponsors, 13 Republicans, 12 Democrats. How often do you see that kind of bipartisan support? Almost never. It means we have a bill that, yeah, it's a compromise, but it's agreeable to both sides of the aisle. I will mention we do know the prime sponsors on this year's bills. On the Senate side, we have 8 co-sponsors, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. On the House side, 10 co-sponsors, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. And they're from all areas of the state. The geographic diversity was important to prove that this isn't just a localized problem. Locally.
Dave, just if I can interrupt you, if you go back to that last slide.
Sure.
Last session,
Where are we here, Jerry?
the one you had up there about the 67%, 33%.
Where's go back?
Yeah, go back.
Up, last slide.
Up. Yeah.
Missed it? Is that the one there?
Yeah.
Previous. Oh, boy, I can't see for here. Come on, let me see here.
You don't have to put it up.
No, I'll put it up.
We had 13 Republicans and 12 Democrats
There
in
we
the
go.
Senate. Yeah, those numbers pretty much accurately reflected the breakdown of each chamber. So I think last term, it was about 67 to 33% Republicans and Democrats, and the Republicans had just about that margin in the Senate as well. So it's not that any less number of Democrats are supporting the bill, it's percentage-wise, they're probably about right.
Yeah, you're right. That's about the breakdown of the chamber. That's correct. Now, locally, one of the prime sponsors, and to give you the difference, prime sponsors are those who are actually introducing the bill. After they send out their co-sponsorship memo, others can sign on to co-sponsor the bill, but the primes are the ones who are really responsible for the legislation. Jerry is a prime sponsor on the House version. And others up here, Karen Boback has always been a strong supporter, as is Aaron. He's totally with us on it. Tara Toohil is with us. Mike Carroll was a co-sponsor last session. This session so far, all we've heard is crickets. So we don't know where he stands on that. And Eddie Day Pashinsky is absolutely an opponent of the bill. And in fact, now I mentioned earlier about someone locally who misrepresented the numbers. When we talked about the retained property tax to cover long-term debt, whenever he talked about it, he always made it seem like your entire property tax bill is going to continue until the debt is paid off. And to us, that's pretty infuriating. I don't care if you want to oppose it, but at least tell the truth. On the Senate side, John Yudichak, Democrat, is a prime sponsor of the Senate bill. Lisa Baker, absolutely. Lisa Baker is also with us. John Blake, who also represents parts of Lackawanna, absolutely opposes the measure, as does John Gordner. From Lackawanna, Marty Flynn was a co-sponsor last session. He's missing in action so far this session, as is Sid Michaels Kavulich. And Frank Farina has never been a sponsor of the bill. So now you know where your local lawmakers stand on this. What I mean here by a clean bill, there isn't much legislation in Harrisburg that doesn't have some perks in it, either for certain lawmakers who wrote it, or friends, or for the special interests. That's not the case with 76, because we wrote the bill. And the only people who benefit from this bill are the taxpayers and the children of Pennsylvania. There is nothing in it to benefit anyone else, and we're very proud of that. Very quickly, a couple of the common objections. Loss of local control. I already talked about that. We shouldn't tax clothing or books or flags or whatever. People who have objected to some of the items in the expanded sales tax base. And there's a certain instinctive reaction saying, no, you shouldn't tax this. Forget the instinct for a second and look at it objectively. The average school property tax bill in Pennsylvania is about $3,500 a year. We're talking about raising the sales tax rate to 7%. If you divide your school property tax bill by 0.07, the new rate, that will tell you how much you would have to spend on newly taxed items and services to equal the amount of school property taxes eliminated. In the case of the $3,500 bill, divide by 0.07, you'll find you'd have to spend $50,000 on newly taxed items and services to equal the amount of property taxes that have been eliminated. Considering that, does it really matter what's added to the sales tax base? I will mention prescription drugs, all medical and dental services, public transportation, home heating fuels are all exempt from the sales tax. They're not covered by taxation. But considering the objective look at it, yeah, you have the instinctive objection to say, oh, we shouldn't tax flags. Why not? You're going to get rid of your school property tax. I'll take it. The plan shouldn't eliminate for businesses. We talked about that, and the numbers don't work. Okay, let's look at the numbers. I know it's difficult for some of you in the back to see this. This is directly from the Independent Fiscal Office analysis. It's a screen capture. 2014-15, now the number they calculated after the outstanding debt was about $10.4 billion. 2014-15, and the line you're interested in is the very bottom line that says net fiscal impact. In this case, the numbers for the bill came up $3 million short against 10.4 billion. That's 0.0003% of the total. That's rounding error. To say that the numbers don't work, I'm sorry. Right there it is. $3 million against 10.4 billion, that's right on the nose. Extended out to 2018-19, the last number, 1.031 billion. Those who oppose the bill are saying that's the number the schools are going to be underfunded by 2017-18 or 2018-19. No. Remember the chart I showed you earlier with the property tax, the average weekly wage, and the CPI? That is the proof that we're flattening that black line and getting it closer to a person's ability to pay. The 1.031 billion is the difference between what the property tax would have generated and what the replacement revenue will generate over time. It's actually a cost savings, not an underfunding to the schools. And I'll tell you what, if people want to fund the schools more, fine with me. I'm not going to argue about that, but do it at the state level and don't do it on the backs of homeowners. Very quickly, statewide acceptance. These are polls that were published last year and 2013 for the Reading Eagle. Reading Eagle explained the bill. That's the one on the right. And I can't read the number. What does it say? 89% of those polled said they agree with House Bill and Senate Bill 76. Okay, that's the eastern side of the state. Let's look at the west. KQV in Pittsburgh did a poll simultaneously with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. They had a pretty detailed explanation of how the bill works, so people weren't guessing. Their response, yes, should be enacted. 78%, 22% said no. Those numbers are huge in politics. What's a good number in politics?
51%.
78% approval statewide, and there are those who say we shouldn't do this? Maybe it's time to start listening to the people. We don't want to hear about optional property taxes. Property tax relief. We know better. Give us the guarantee. And I hear so many times, I hope you'll do something about it. I can't do anything. This is a total grassroots effort. We are the ones who've been pushing this for the past 10 years, and it involves you folks. I do these meetings to try to enlist you to join the effort, meaning calling your lawmakers, letting them know what you want, tell others about it, spread the word, because the only way we're going to win this is through a grassroots effort. We are in a battle. It's us against the special interests who oppose the bill. This time, we're going to win it. But you need to get involved. I alone can't do anything. With all of you, we can. And good luck. I hope you can do it. I can't do it. You can do it. All of us can do it. Yeah, I got you. I do want to mention again, as Charlie did in the beginning, we are so grateful for 1824 Productions volunteering to do this webcast. If you notice, there's 4 cameras around here. This is quite the setup, and reaching a statewide audience because of them, we're very grateful for it. What I'd like you to do, over here on this table, we have email sign-up sheets. If you just give me your email address, I don't want names, addresses, phone numbers, anything else. I don't keep a database. Just your email address so you can get the updates. I will not spam your inbox. The last update was sent early April. The one before that was February, so you're not going to be getting updates every day. So if you want to leave your email address, that would be fine. I'd appreciate that. Go to the website, and a lot of the information we talked about is there in plain language, a lot of details. Facebook group, 4,100 members. We'd like you to join that community if you're a Facebook subscriber. There it is, Groups PA Taxpayers, and if you're a Twitter subscriber, you can follow our feed at PA Taxpayers. And I believe, yeah, okay. Now, gentlemen, Jerry, you want to go first?
Sure.
I'll answer some questions when
Can you
they're
hear me?
finished.
First, I would just like to thank everyone for coming out and everybody who's watching across the webcast. I think the last thing Dave said is the most important thing, that this is a grassroots effort. And every time I speak at one of these, and I've heard Dave's presentation, I think this is the fourth time that I've heard it, including 3 times in the last maybe 4 months. This is about the crowd we get, and people all want to know, what can we do to make this a reality? And all you can do is wield the largest and heaviest hammer you have, which is your lever on Election Day, and make certain that the people that you are casting your support for are for this bill. And if they aren't, then they need to be voted out and replaced with someone who is. This is my 3rd term in Harrisburg. Each term that has progressed, I've seen more and more support for this bill. Here's where a recent problem has occurred for you and those who are similarly situated. My email, telephone, personal visits have blown up since the governor's address in March, asking for my support for the governor's budget. And the reasons are clear. There is a lot of, and we'll use the word that Dave doesn't like to hear, relief provided in the governor's bill. And when you look at towns like the towns that I represent, Nanticoke, Larksville, Plymouth, the suburbs of Hazleton, there are school districts contained in there that are receiving a 93% reduction in property taxes because they are poorer school districts with houses of lesser value, and the governor is attempting to shift his tax relief to those types of areas. So the people that I represent are seeing a significant decrease in their property taxes associated with the governor's budget. You and I know that the possibility for that to recur exists under the plan, which is why I support HB 76, and I'm proud to be one of the 10 prime sponsors in the House. But they are hammering me and other legislators with their desired support for the governor's bill. You need to be louder. And unfortunately, you don't need to be talking to me and Aaron and Tara and John, because we're supporters. And it makes it very easy for us to come to these events, and I try to get to as many as I can to speak with you and hear your concerns, because when I hear your personal story, that's what I share with my colleagues in Harrisburg who tell me they don't hear these stories. And I try to tell them this is how it affects the retiree, this is how it affects the young couple, this is how it affects those who are trying to get to the point in their life where they can live on their pensions and retirement benefits and things like that, because they're telling me they don't hear it. So it's important that you come out and you share your stories with us. But unfortunately for you, we're not the audience. You've gotten us. We're locked in. We're happy to be here to show you our support, but you really need to focus on the list of names that Dave gave you. And a lot of those people are my friends, Aaron's friends. We deal with them. A lot of times we're on the same side of an issue and we fight for it. But on this particular issue, we're not. The reason it's so important to me is because it is so important to the people that I represent. It is the #1 constituent issue I deal with. A single day does not go by where I am not questioned about the status of the bill, thanked repeatedly for my support of the bill, asked what people can do to progress this bill forward. And that comes in every form imaginable: email, telephone call, stop-bys. If I go out to pick up a gallon of milk, I'm questioned about this bill. There isn't a close second issue, not a close second issue for me. So I don't know what more I can tell you, just that I'll continue to fight for you as long as I'm in Harrisburg. I think this is an issue of vital importance to Pennsylvania, and not just to you. Dave brought up another very, very good point. This is an issue for businesses, and a lot of my colleagues bring up that argument, and that is their first argument. Once we get beyond the numbers don't work, because they do, and we get to argument number two is, why are we providing businesses with tax relief? Because we have to, because we are 49th and 50th on lists. Not only do we have to eliminate property tax, we have to reduce the corporate net income tax. I think we have the second highest corporate net income tax in the nation. We need to make Pennsylvania a place where businesses can't afford not to come here. And the start to that is the elimination of these taxes. So my pledge to you is that I'll keep working with you. I'll keep coming to these events if you keep inviting me. I'll try to give you updates as things progress, but I'm with you 100%, and I hope that we can push this through to the finish line for you.
And thank you, Jerry. And I just want to make a quick point. Jerry said this very quickly. Jerry is a prime sponsor of this legislation. And I know he said that very quickly. He is one of the main people pushing this legislation in our state house. So I want to give him credit for being and putting your name up there and doing it. And I'm proud to say I've co-sponsored the legislation. As a freshman, I'm not a prime sponsor on it, but I am right there 100% with Jerry on this, and we'll be fighting on the front lines with this. I'm going to say a couple words, but before I go on, I want to mention two people specifically. I want to first thank Dave for coming here, because he travels all across the state, doing this all over. I asked him where he was last. He couldn't even remember. So I want to give Dave a round of applause, please. He does a phenomenal job. And one other person I want to mention is Charlie Urban. And all of us know Charlie Urban because I know I get him to stop by my office at least 3 times a week. I know he's on the phone with you guys, sending out emails all across our state. He set this up, and I do want to mention that Charlie, and please give him a round of applause. Thank you, Charlie. Let me ask you one question before I start saying what I want to say. How many of us in this room have a family member, a son, a daughter, a sibling, a close personal friend who has recently moved out of our state? Raise your hand if you have. A lot of us have. I'm 26 years old, recent graduate not too long ago, and I can tell you the friends who have stayed in this area upon graduating college is few and far between. I could probably count them on probably 2 hands of my friends from high school who are still in our area. It's because they can't find jobs. They can't move into homes and pay their property taxes. It's an issue across the state. There's no doubt about it. We talked about the business end of things. But the thing is, how are we going to stabilize our housing market? Dave was 100% dead on. And I lecture about the 2008 housing collapse. I've been doing it actually since I was in Lafayette. While I was still a student there, I've done it after graduating, about what happened in the 2008 housing collapse and the problems that we're still in now. We have yet to stabilize the housing market. Our property values are not nearly growing in the value that our property taxes are. And I think we all feel that. We see young people graduating high school, college, going to other states to find jobs, and it's for a reason, because we're not being competitive and we're not being fair in our state. Now, I love when Dave brings up the history of property taxes. Property taxes began when we were an agrarian society, before we even had income taxes. As a tax assessor would come, tell you how many acres you have of your land, and tax you based on your acreage of your land. They thought it was too intrusive to find out how much somebody was actually making. Property taxes don't actually value your ability to pay taxes. It's the biggest issue we have going on here. It's the biggest issue that legislators across our state and constituents, people who are voters who are living here in Pennsylvania, need to take into consideration, whether somebody can pay a tax or not. We are hurting and kicking people out of their homes for the most vulnerable citizens in our area. The low, middle income, working class are the ones who are losing out here. I want to mention one key point to what's being discussed here. Jim Cox tried starting a political action committee to raise money for school property taxes about this issue. He started up a PAC so that we could help fund candidates and be out there. And you think about it, we're asking people to donate money for the people who can't afford to stay in their homes, people that don't have extra money right now. We don't have a special interest behind us, backing us, the people who are standing up and the people supporting this legislation. We are there for the people's interests. That's why it's so much more important to be out there on this legislation. We don't have big backers funding our campaigns going out there. We need the people on our side. And as vocal as you're sick of those corporations that are funding these campaigns, just writing blank checks to politicians to get them elected, your voice has to be louder than that too. I would love it to see people who attend this meeting to hear about this legislation, but you have to do more. Jerry mentioned it very well. I mean, you don't have to worry about Jerry. You don't have to worry about me. The other people who aren't signed on to this bill are the ones you need to worry about. I really do appreciate getting the messages from you. I do. I like it. Thank you. But you have my vote. My vote is there. There's no question where it's at. We have to get after the members who aren't supporting it right now. The people's interests have to outweigh the special interests. I think that's what we're sick of. You know, if you had the list, and I should have brought it, the list of special interests opposed to this legislation is pretty incredible. It really is. You look at it, you know, and people will come up with any argument under the sun to be against it. Well, we need to give them a reason to be for it, before the legislation, to support it. Our voice is getting louder. I know that this legislation has just been reintroduced to be considered. It was sent out for co-sponsorship. And I hope that you will stand with me, not just sit here in this audience, but get out there and say something. And that's not only the people in this room, it's the people who are listening across the state and all across the state. The heat is on. It's time to get something done. Thank you, everybody.
Any questions for me or for the representatives? Oh, boy, I saw that hand come up in a hurry. What's up?
First of all, Mike Carroll is my state representative. I saw him a month ago, and I told him, you know, that he told, like, when he talked to me, I saw he was wavering, and then he said to me, giving up, I mean, I didn't know how to answer him because he ambushed me. He said, you're giving up local control when the teachers are gonna go for raises. Where's the money gonna come from? Now, we know, before I finish, we know over 70% of the teachers and administrators' salaries come from, you know, in the school budgets. So I didn't know what to tell them.
Sure.
So again, if everything is frozen like this, that's fine. You just take the property tax money out and replace it with the sales tax money. But in the future, when teachers go for raises, how are they going to be funded? I don't know. That's what I'd like you to tell me.
Okay, let's talk about that. Local control. The single largest special interest campaign contributor in this state is the PSEA, the teachers union. They are fighting it tooth and nail. They know that because I talked about how the annual increases to the schools work, basically limiting it to inflation. Right now, when a school board negotiates a contract with the teachers union, PSEA sends their high-powered specialists in from Harrisburg, and they beat the crap out of the school boards. And the school boards finally say, we give up, we'll give you what you want, we'll just raise property taxes to cover it. Well, guess what? They can't do that anymore. And it's going to make them more fiscally responsible. Look, I have the utmost respect for teachers, so please don't take this as teacher bashing. But how many people in this economic climate get 4 and 5% a year raises? Is there any reason why it can't be financed through the annual increases that the schools get from the state? Plus, if the school district feels that they really need it, they still have the option of the local referendum. To say that it gives up local control is a bunch of crap. And I think I explained that. Next one. Yes, sir, I saw yours go first.
I think it's time to shame the legislators that are against property tax elimination. I see you have a flyer there. I support Senate Bill 76. But that flyer, or one similar to that, would include the names of the legislators that are opposed to property tax elimination. And those flyers be displayed at the polls on voting day. People will become more educated about who their friendly legislators are and who the jerks are.
Absolutely. And in a lot of cases, go ahead.
You can't wait that long. You need to be actively recruiting candidates way before Election Day. So the important thing to do is to identify those legislators that do not support now. So it's what, May, tomorrow, right? Tomorrow's May. It's May of an off election year. You have a year to get out, find somebody who does support, get their message out, get backing behind them, get them financial support, and get them on the ballot. So you're not going there in May or in November and running up against an unopposed candidate. So the time to act is now. You can't wait until Election Day.
And hopefully, we'll get this thing passed and that won't be necessary. Hopefully. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I totally agree with your concept of the sales tax. I'm a proponent of fair tax on a national level. I would like to see the IRS gone out of our lives and fund our country with sales tax. Like, I can see how that works. Money works by changing hands, velocity, not by printing it. And so that's the basis here. But two questions I have. Would there be any new bureaucracy needed to distribute the funds to the school districts? That's one question I have. And then going back, you mentioned a couple times school boards with agendas. The legislation, would that have a mechanism that is hard and fast that controls local school boards when they need to enact a referendum to get an extra tax for a short period of time? That would be hard and fast to legislate. Would that be standardized throughout the state?
If you're talking about the referendum for a local EIT or PIT, yes, that's standardized. Okay. No school district, the only taxation method allowed to them, let me back up. There's a basket of 10 taxes called the Act 511 taxes. Act 511 was enacted in 1965, and it's things like mechanical amusement tax, and it's a bunch of little nuisance taxes. The school boards can use those, but they have very strict limits on them, and a lot of school boards already use them. So the only taxation method left to the school boards under 76 is that local earned income tax and personal income tax, and that is statewide and must be by voter referendum in each district as the school district proposes it. No question about that. What was your first question again?
About bureaucracy to administrate the tax.
Zero. The money is the revenue is taken in through the current income tax and sales tax system. It's driven back out through the current Department of Education system. Zero extra bureaucracy to do this. And in fact, you could actually say it's not quite there yet, but you could actually say there could be a reduction in bureaucracy. You might not need as many tax collectors. And our goal in the end is to get rid of the school property tax first, because that's the most onerous. It's about 2/3 of the total property tax bill. Once that's finished, then go after the county and municipal taxes, which is a totally different animal and has to be done in a different way. But we'd like eventually to get rid of all the property taxes. But to answer your question more directly, no. Yes, sir.
Apologize for my ignorance, but if there is, if the law passes, but the governor would veto it, is there some kind of a a different kind of override that has to happen then with the legislature?
2/3 vote of the House and Senate. However, Senator David Argall, who was prime sponsor of Senate Bill 76 last session, and again as a prime this session, made the point that if this bill passes the General Assembly. Now, let me back up again for a second. The WILK property tax plan and another bill that's come out of the House, House Bill 860, sponsored by Representative Stan Saylor of York County, has gotten a lot of attention in the past couple of weeks in the media. If 76 passes for total elimination, the media is going to explode. And people are going to really support this. As Senator Argall said, I would not want to be the governor who vetoes this legislation.
That's right.
We had one term, Tom. We could be heading for a second one if he tried that. Need a 2/3 override, but I don't see him vetoing this. Not with the kind of public support it's going to get if it makes it through the General Assembly. I just don't see that happening. All the way in the back, sir.
Mr. Wilk was very generous in stealing some of our goals here in this plan. And now he's going to tax all those things that we wanted to tax, plus he's going to get the taxes that are already in existence. What's to prevent those taxes that are supposed to be reduced from not rising up to where they are not right now and even higher than they are right now? So we're paying the same property tax we are now, plus the added taxes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the governor says that there's cost controls built into his idea. He first of all talks about the Act 1 cost controls. I already told you about those. They're virtually meaningless. His other control is that he says no school board can raise taxes if they have an unreserved fund balance greater than 4%. Well, I talked to a local school director who said we just move money around internally. If we have an unreserved fund balance that's greater than 4%, we'll just move it someplace else so it's below 4% and we can raise property taxes. But I think there's a good reason for it too. Some school districts who are frugal actually, and there are a few school districts who have huge unreserved fund balances they shouldn't have. But there are some frugal school districts who actually are using it as sort of a savings account to meet expenses in the future so they don't have to raise taxes. The governor's idea to force them to get below a 4% unreserved balance would really put the pressure on them. And I don't necessarily agree with that. But the 4% unreserved balance, they can move the money around any way they want to and still come up with a way to raise property taxes. You're absolutely correct. The property taxes will continue to rise unabated, and whatever relief you get has gone away, period. No matter if you're getting, as Representative Mullery said, 93%, or West Green of 306, or those poor suckers in Mars at 15%. Eventually, and by the way, study done on this says 405 of 500 school districts, the taxpayers will pay more in total taxes under the governor's plan. Only 95% of the districts will the homeowners actually see a savings because of the redistribution of wealth. Yes, sir, I saw your hand.
Has there been anything done, or is there any plans to bring probably one of the most influential grassroots sources, the American Labor Union, to play in this case? PSEA is a very obvious participant against this bill. But how about the coal mining guys? How about the folks who used to work in the truck plants in Allentown, who have been on layoff now for many, many years?
We have tried, and in fact, Charlie can tell you about this with, I'm drawing a blank here. Your union, Charlie?
Ask me.
Yeah, what union were you part of?
Ask me. Ask me.
Huh?
Ask me.
Ask me. American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees. Charlie has been trying. Charlie was a member of AFSCME, and he's been trying to get them behind the bill. They refuse to do it. I think the problem is, early on, going back to the Rohrer days, this was always viewed as a Republican bill. Therefore, no Democrats supported it. I think there is still that perception out there, even though it's not true. We've seen the bipartisanship. But in general, I think a lot of labor unions align themselves to the left. And whether or not they agree with the concept, I think they would rather align themselves with the political ideology. And that's why it's so difficult to get them on board.
I might suggest you rethink that, because there are a number of mine-working families in Western Pennsylvania in particular who are in a position to add their strength to a group like this. No union wants to be the first guy on the block.
You're
But
right.
if we have a couple, they may be the smaller ones, the smaller locals, it's got to start. But the unions, this area where you're at right now, very, at one point in its history, very much a union town.
And I appreciate,
Why not get the unions involved? They're the ones who, along with the people that are here, who really carry the voice.
I think you're absolutely correct, and that's something we should consider in the future, and I appreciate that suggestion. We will very definitely work for it. I saw your hand. I'll get to you in a minute, sir. Go ahead.
In that regard, it might be easier to do something to convince the PSEA that it's not going to harm them in any way.
We have tried that, and in fact, I think they're being short-sighted because I don't keep close tabs on what's happening here, but I know in my area that we've seen a lot of teacher furloughs. This would guarantee a stable funding source. Remember we talked about property taxes not being as stable as everybody says they are? This at least guarantees a stable funding source that I think would help preserve jobs and get rid of a lot of these teacher furloughs that we're seeing. The PSEA doesn't see it that way. All they see is the inability to negotiate the kind of contracts they've been negotiating. And I just wish they'd consider it from every side. It's difficult. And I don't know that we'll ever be able to get the PSEA on our side. Incidentally, as an aside, between the PSEA, National Federation of Teachers, Pennsylvania Federation of Teachers, the governor took more than $1.5 million in campaign funding. And his plan is thoroughly aligned with what the PSEA would like to see. In fact, they've come out in support of it. So that may answer a few questions, too. I saw a man over here. I'll get to you. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for everything you do. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
My question is similar to that gentleman. You had a slide up and you said in 10 years, education is going to cost $53 billion. Totally unsustainable. How could the PSEA not see that? And why would they not? I mean, it's like an 800-pound gorilla for them. I mean, there's going to be more furloughs and layoffs.
Dave.
Oh, my God.
Representative Mullery,
You're going to
raise
see
your hand.
something happen way before that, and it's going to happen in Luzerne County. We have several school districts in this county that are not going to be able to meet their financial obligations within the next 24 months. So when you have schools that right now today have a zero or negative fund balance, and schools that know that the revenue that they will be generating isn't enough to cover the costs that they will incur now. But they may be able to open their doors in September when school starts, but they may not be able to keep them open in the following January. It may take something as drastic as one of our schools locking its doors, sending its students to surrounding schools for them to come on board. And what I can tell you is it's not going to take the 10 years and the 50% increase or whatever it was that Dave showed. It's going to happen within the next 2 years. The thing that's preventing it from happening today is nobody wants to be the first school.
Can I just follow up on what he said? Just give me 1 second. I was in a meeting recently talking with some of our local school officials, our administrators, our school board members. We had a round table, and during this round table, a couple people came up to me and said, the only thing that's happening is exactly what Jerry said at the end here. We don't want to be the first one to close. That was their perspective. So I know that several school districts have come up to me to say the same exact thing. It is a real issue that's out there, and I'm sorry.
My second question was regarding school directors. It seems that this act would be a friend to the school directors. Are they supporting it, and where are they?
We have had many school board members tell us they would prefer to see this done. Right now, they're too concerned about finances. They don't want to take the heat for property tax increases. Said, give us a budget, we'll work within it, let us work on curriculum and educating the students rather than being fundraisers. And yes, we have a lot of school board members who support this bill.
Dave, one more, hold on.
Go ahead.
I just need to apologize. It's 8:30. I'm about 15 minutes past when I said I had to leave. I have 4 kids at 3 different places. So I'm gonna head out now. But my email information, my phone information, everything is out on the internet. I have offices in Freeland and in Nanticoke. You're free to stop in and talk about this. But if anybody has any questions, please please do not hesitate to email me or call me. All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
Hey, good
Thank you very much. Help us out, buddy.
And I just want to say one more thing, too. I know we're going to continue here with the Q&A, and before Mark leaves here, I do also want to point out that Senator Yudichak locally is also one of the prime sponsors of House Bill, Senate Bill 76. And he's also one of our local leaders on this. I wanted to make sure that he got recognized. Yeah, give a round of applause for John Yudichak.
All right, one more. There's one behind you who hasn't asked a question. I'll get back to you. Yes, ma'am. Two more. You and you. Go ahead.
Young teachers unions don't know for
That's why he's opposed to it.
Well, I'm sorry, I had difficulty hearing you. Will somebody repeat that?
after representatives get paid from a union to have a vote when we paid them, we put them in the office. And the people from this area aren't even aware of that. He's not for them to get rid of this tax, but he wants to increase.
They are more concerned with keeping their special interest campaign funding intact than doing what is right for their constituents.
And these people do not know.
And we have seen this time and again that the special interests always win. But we're not going to let that happen this time. It's time for our voices to be heard. Yes, sir. Last question.
I wanted to ask Jerry and Aaron, but since Jerry left, I'll ask Aaron. Aaron, were you approached by the PSEA to be against this?
No, I was not.
Okay.
They know better.
I would say that we had quite a couple throwdowns during the election. So.
Well, I have to keep going back to my Carroll because this is my state rep. Now, you said last year he was for it or whatever. This year, nothing but crickets.
Yep.
Now, just point of interest, his father's a retired school teacher.
HDCC chair.
What was it?
HDCC chair.
Okay.
That sheds a little different light on the story.
I didn't say anything. Thank you.
I'll talk with you.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, too, there's the problem. I don't know if I said it in the meeting, but there's a problem for the Democrats. Because those who supported the bill last year now have to decide whether they want to support 76 or stick with the governor and his party line. And that's a tough decision for them to make. Fortunately, people like John Yudichak and Jerry Mullery have made their decision, and they want to do what's best for the people. This is not a partisan issue. It has nothing to do with party politics. It has to do what is right for the people of Pennsylvania. And it's time for those who insist that it's a partisan issue to get off their high horse and do what they need to do for their constituents. Here I am lecturing it. Okay, your last question. Go ahead.
This is for Aaron. Jerry is my representative. I'm very proud of that, for his stamp. But I've gone just about once a month. I call Gordner, Wyszynski, and Jerry Blake. And as soon as they ask me my name, where I am, they kind of lose interest. How effective is it for me to call these people?
Well, I was about to say, no matter what you do, I mean, I know that in my office, there is more validity when somebody calls me from my district. That's me personally. If I get the phone call, there's more validity of somebody who's from my district if they're calling me. The fact is, we need to blow up their phones, not literally, but make sure that we make sure they're ringing off the hook, that there's nothing else they can do except answer those phone calls in regard to supporting House Bill and Senate Bill 76. And whether that means targeting a legislator for a day statewide, that 4,100 phone calls in one office in one day, you'd get my attention.
That'd do it.
And I know that we said this was going to be our last question, so I would really appreciate if we could all join in a round of a standing ovation for Dave Baldinger for what he's doing for this cause. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody who came out tonight. It's appreciated. We're very happy for all the folks who watched it on the web. And thank you, 1824 Productions, for your wonderful webcast for us. Thank you, everybody. And spread the word. Spread the word.
And also a thank you to Janice, his wife, who travels all across the state with him, too. The unsung hero of keeping him on track, too. So.
We're bringing it to Blake, we're bringing it to Kavulich. I'm going to get 25 to 50 people.
You're welcome.
You know what? Hammer his ass. Yes, because he voted once during the debate. He said, I voted for it. Guess what? We're holding him to it. Screw him to the wall. This is the year, right? Because if we don't, it's going to be lost. We're going to get tough.
things. We're going to go through this, we have a strategy that is pretty much bulletproof. You bet. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming out.
Questions that the citizen voice wants us to take part in voter website. Three questions was, how would you keep taxes down? And when they don't want to vote for taxes for any reason, state mandated or even budget. But your answers are good. Maybe help you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Simple question. So we'll see you again. You gotta tell them science for your next I don't think anybody in the state that knows this better than you. Inside, outside, backwards. You did a nice job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have
Associations, they can have fundraisers. If they're so well funded. I don't know either. It makes no sense.
David, John Linsky, you answered my email today.
Yes, sir.
I don't see anybody here from the newspapers. You? Yes, sir. Or did I miss it? Not one. Not one, and nothing in any of the local newspapers.